Got you where I want you, where I want you, I want you. Oh, that's a good song, man. Okay, so instead of, I guess I'll just hum some songs. That way I don't get sued for like using YouTube songs. And today is Friday, March 3rd. Hopefully you're out and you're not listening to me right now. You're going to be listening to me at some other time, like a Sunday, because you should be out and doing stuff, buddy. What you doing here? So, time for my show, and it's kind of an important subject to me because of how I grew up, and I bet you I'm not the only one. Now, have any of you had that feeling that you're just kind of like floating around in the ether, that you're not part of a family, a community, a church, any of that? In a lot of ways, society kind of destroyed the whole like community thing. That's why I'm not too fond of cities. I'd rather live in kind of a small town, or like, maybe even a busy little town, but just a town where you know the guy who cuts your hair. Not just because you sit in his chair once a month, but because, you went to school with his daughter, or, whatever. These connections between people. It's a different way of living than a lot of us are used to. I remember being a kid, and me and my father were walking down the street for whatever reason. Even though we're in this kind of a decent little hamlet in eastern Queens, pretty nice neighborhood, actually. I was terrified all the time because of, the panic disorder. And when he would say hi to people like 2 blocks away, like they weren't really our neighbors. And it was funny because they were New Yorkers, so they have this kind of like, you're saying hi to me? What the hell's going on? Like they think you're scoping out their house. But this is like, like a 60-year-old man and his young son, right? So there's some assumptions you could kind of make. Well, I guess the son has really good eyesight, and that's why he brings him along to really scope out the houses. Well, that wouldn't be one of those. Yeah, that would be kind of a weird assumption. Bit crazy. And I forgot that my father was from Chillicothe, Ohio. He was kind of a transplant. They moved all over before settling in Staten Island, and he worked in Manhattan. His family was in Staten Island. I think he went to school there for a while. And then eventually he came back and he settled in Manhattan. And then after that, he settled in Queens when he bought a house for me and my brothers. And he had like a different mentality that didn't seem to fit the New Yorker thing. Our neighborhood wasn't that New York either. It was more Long Island. Wasn't like a city neighborhood. It was nice, I miss it. But there was this kind of lack of community even there. Like you might know your neighbor, might know even more than one neighbor, but you more knew of them. It didn't help we were the only Unitarians in a Jewish neighborhood. But to this day, I don't know the people right next door to me. I don't know what they were, if they were Jewish, Christian, what sect. I have no idea. They were just nice people. And I had some good neighbors too. Good upstanding folk. Why am I talking about this, though? Here's the thing. We all need something like that. We need connections to our community. We need those friendly neighbors. And this is why I'm kind of down on cities, because it's like packing people in, but they're alone. It's like the loneliest places in the world are the places with the most people. It's like a constant reminder that you don't know them. You're not connected to them. And it's no wonder that things get kind of negative in such atmospheres. And there's also kind of the Calhoun studies with like the tipping points. You put enough mice together and suddenly they kind of turn cannibalistic. Some of the males turn kind of effeminate. Some of the females turn like really, overly aggressive and start abusing the effeminate males. It's like there's this whole thing. Check out the Calhoun studies. It'll be kind of an eye-opener. What happens when populations go beyond a certain point. But it's not always the fault of society. We have families. And I would hope to think that most of us kept kind of a sense of family. And the lack of that feeling like, your parents are your parents, that they're there for you no matter how screwed up they are, that kind of chips away at your soul. Makes you feel like you're worthless, like you don't know why you're even there. And it's crazy making. You get crazy over it. And all it takes is like that one kind of well-meaning person in your family to kind of go, yeah, that's right too. Yeah, I've seen that. I feel that way too. And suddenly you kind of have a family back, You have something. And it's better to be in a dysfunctional family. And I speak from experience. It's better to be in some sort of weird dysfunctional family than it is to be alone, to be just kind of floating in the ether. You got to have somebody in your life you feel like they have your back. And the more viciously so, the better it feels, to be honest. And a lot of us are missing that. We're missing that kind of sense that we're tied down to something. And I know, family sometimes feels in the negative, like you're tied down, you can't do what you want to do. But trust me, it's better to feel that than to feel like no one's got your back. It's the gang of one, the army of one. No man is an island like that. No man or woman. We need each other, and people have asked me some deep questions. I guess I've been lucky enough to know people who really got into deep conversations with me. It's funny, when I was a heavy drinker, that was my favorite thing to do, to really connect to people and have these really deep conversations. And I know why now, because I wanted that connection. I wanted to, be part of somebody's life. And when you have a family and you don't feel like you're part of their life, or you feel like you detract for them or they detract from you, and that's it. I mean, it's one thing to be like, I don't like my sister that much. Sibling rivalries are fine. But when there's kind of an abusive sibling relationship or a neglectful one where, for whatever reason, and this happens a lot in divorced families, sometimes you get one sibling who's with one parent, the other siblings are kind of with another. A lot of times everyone ends up with neither. Those aren't healthy dynamics to kind of look at somebody as on the other team. If you're going to wave a foam finger, it should be, all together. But divorces cause some strange things, and people get a real heavy sense of loss, not necessarily from the divorce. If you have two loving parents that you see, one's on the weekend, one's on the weekday, they split holidays, blah, blah, blah. That's not necessarily the grief. It's kind of being abandoned by both of them because for whatever reason they can't play the part of parent anymore, or they never could. That's the rub. That's kind of the kind of gruesome hand that rips in and tears a chunk of your soul out, where you get some very heavy messages. You're here to make sure I don't flip out. You're here to look on my emotions, pay attention to my emotions, and not be a problem. Or I don't know why you're here. I just kind of have this legal thing where I have to take care of you until you're 18. You get these messages kind of hard and straight. And they're not picnic messages. They aren't Disney. They're very powerful, and they can have a very powerful effect on people. And I know we talk about water under the bridge, but that's pop psych. That doesn't exist the way you think it does. these things always have an effect. And I'm not playing the blame game, because a lot of times, the parent or the siblings, they've gone through things that have taken away that part of them too. And you have people who are kind of desperately looking for some sort of connection, and the last people they want to do it with are the people that are closest to them, because it's scary as shit. To actually show somebody who's in your life, and can, like when you're young, they can kick you out of the house, or they can, make your life miserable, or make sure you don't go to college, or, all these, you see it as more of a power game. Like, if I displease this parent or that parent, they're going to take away something from me. And that's not a fear that most children have of their parents. The children could be pretty awful at times to their parents, and then they turn around and expect them to pay for college, right? And that's universal. Not that they're awful. It's universal that, they're not afraid their parents are going to stop being their parents. And when you're not connected in that way, and they've already stopped being your parents, or your siblings, or, or maybe you have the opposite, where you're a parent and you can't connect with your children, and you have this fear of them kind of, removing themselves from your life because you can't connect for whatever reason, and now you're afraid that they're just kind of leave you in the dark. The sword cuts kind of both ways. Even when you're in this and you're the one who can't connect, you're almost afraid of the same things. It's almost like we're all that kind of little child that's like kind of grasping for connection. And I think the most painful thing in the world, and people have asked me this in some of my deeper conversations, is the fear that even if you reach out, it doesn't matter. You're just not allowed to connect that way with the people you're supposed to. And I think that's the root of a lot of depression. I know it has been in me. I mean, I have, obviously I have some other things. I always felt really unsafe around my family. I never felt like I was home. I really kind of connected that feeling of home with the actual house I used to live in. And my dream was to get that house, was to be the keeper of the house. And, in this hopeful kind of dream world where my brothers wouldn't force me to sell it, ended up getting sold before my father passed away. And because I had put kind of my whole family connection, not connecting to people, but to this house, I literally used to have a background on my phone that was a picture of my old house, like a family member that passed away. And for years afterwards, when I was still in New York, every once in a while I'd drive by the house to kind of see the tombstone of what used to be. And it was a transference. I transferred like my love of that I should be sharing with other people. And I got a loud and clear message that I wasn't allowed to. And I think a lot of you did too. We're so unattached in this kind of, the modern world kind of encourages that, but some of us just fall to it. It's almost like we fall to despair. We fall to whatever happened to us. A lot of those kind of pop psych kind of things go through our heads and make excuses. See, that's what I see the difference between pop psychology and regular psychology. In regular psychology, you're not looking to, transfer or project or deny. You're looking the opposite. You're looking to cut through all of that bullshit and to get to a point where you can connect. But with pop psych, you're really just looking to kind of distance yourself even more. And you make up these excuses like, oh, they don't want to talk to me. Oh, I don't want to be a burden. Like these pop psych things are just expressions of defense mechanisms. They're the expressions of these mental gymnastics we do so we don't have to connect, or because we're so scared of doing that and getting rejected. And if you've been rejected already, if you've gotten like a loud and clear message, your emotional well-being isn't important to what's going on here. And I'm sure there are worse families than mine. Where there was more an overt, kind of like you don't count, you're not important, like said out loud. Most of the time, though, most of what we go through, and not to minimize people who go through overt abuse, but most of us go through more of a unspoken dynamic, like a narcissistic dynamic where a parent is messed up and they can't see a child as having emotional needs. They just know about their own, and they see the child as having, detracting from their emotional well-being if they behave a certain way. They never let that child be a child. It's always more about how that child is acting and how it affects them, or does it embarrass them, or and nobody's the bad guy or the good guy in this. Parents act that way because of their own grief, their own things they're dealing with, that they haven't been able to. I guess the only thing that's kind of makes you a bad guy is to not try. Is to just give up. Maybe that's not so true. People give up because of depression, and a lot of people don't understand depression. Again, more pop psych. You get angry at people who neglect, ignore, and detract from you, who don't support you. And you're kind of supposed to. There's a level of anger you should kind of have. And even if you reach a kind of understanding that, okay, they're limited, they don't have those powers to, connect, to, to supply the emotional needs is what I'm getting at. I was talking to my sister, Anna Bear, and she's probably going to hate that I mention her every once in a while on these podcasts. So sorry, hon. But it's funny that you could be in the same family and everyone's feeling the same way, and you don't know it till you're adults. So you have that conversation, and suddenly, like, you both feel better knowing that at least you weren't crazy, because that's a big part of it. You're getting gaslit. Your reality is important. That's one of the emotional needs, kind of like backing up your reality. And when people around you don't back up your reality, and they're still parents, so maybe your reality is a little twisted, and they have every right to kind of try to drag you back a little bit. But when things are plain and simple, and you're seeing it for what it is, and then people turn around and kind of, do the whole smoke and mirrors thing, and it's like, no, it's not like that. Oh, why would you think that? Oh, there must be something wrong with you if you think that. And they're, like doing these magic tricks and flipping cards in their hands. It's crazy making, and it makes you angry. But at the same time, it's like, am I okay to be angry? I think some of the times we get the most angry when we don't know if it's okay. And we actually have this thing where we're like, am I allowed? And it just gets more and more frustrating, where you don't allow yourself to be angry at the slights that happen to you, especially from your family. It's like, oh, I don't want to endanger those relationships. And you go into a mode where you're constantly protecting against endangering those relationships and not having those relationships. There's going to be fights. There's going to be disagreements, especially when you're all coming out of a kind of a really horrible dynamic. And now everybody's an adult, let's say, and You got to figure out how to kind of piece that together and have those relationships now. And sometimes somebody's just not willing to have it for whatever reason. It was just whatever they went through was just something they can't deal with. And you got to kind of feel sorry for people who have gone that far over the edge where they're not open to any kind of relationship. They're so scared of losing the fake relationship that they never risk having the real one. And it hurts. It hurts. Like 1,000 breakups kind of hurt with your first girlfriend or boyfriend, It's just that kind of hurt that kind of goes really deep. Because even if you have a relationship and it's tight and it's amazing and then something happens to it, you'll mourn it and you'll get over it. But most people would have like their, best friend and their family to kind of fall back on. It's such a risk to take to have relationships and to maybe go through something really, a really horrible breakup or a divorce but you don't have any of that. You're orphaned, even though there are people who on paper are related to you. And it's a scary, scary thing to risk that relationship, to go from the fake to the real. And most of us don't know how to do that. And honestly, I can't even give that advice. I don't know. I'm still kind of in the faux relationships with a lot of my family. I'm just smoking regular tobacco, by the way. I know you could hear the lighter and me puffy. Although I gotta say, it would be nice to have some wacky tobacco. The right blend, because a lot of blends make me paranoid as opposed to just giddy. I've gone both ways with that, as far as what I smoke and how it affects me. Sometimes it's really nice. I still, I'm in an elderly community and I smell like marijuana. Marijuana. I smell the Mary Jane, and it brings back kind of happy memories because I had some friends that I think I kind of connected to, right? And for the longest, I was mad that I kind of gave up those friendships because of whatever kind of grief. But in a lot of ways, I didn't know how to have those friendships. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what I'd be missing. I didn't know as an adult that I'd be, remembering the smell of weed and thinking those were some good times with my friend Lance and John. We were like the Three Muscatels. That was cool shit. I was happy sometimes then. And it's funny, you don't remember the drug. It's just that that's what you did together, That was the more important part. It was the friendships. It was the connection. And I don't think anybody on their deathbed wants to say, I wish I would have connected to some people. Who are you even saying it to if you've never connected to anybody? Just, blurbing that out to some nurse. You hope that there would be some people there that are surviving you. And it's, like I said, it's scary. Especially for somebody like me who's scared of so many things. Who grew up just so scared and traumatized all the time. But I remember in the depths of my depression, I think I was talking out loud to myself. But I think I had picked up my mother from work. So I was kind of having a conversation with myself, but she was kind of in the room, which I'm kind of used to. Now I have a mic, and that's, who I can talk to. That's why it's so therapeutic for me in particular. And there was this kind of, and I brought it up before I went on 50 tangents, because it's kind of hard to say. the meaning of life, I don't see it as like some sort of, gathering riches or, becoming successful. I see, life can be pretty miserable. It can get messed up in a whole lot of ways. And that messed up can be started way before you're even alive. And, what your grandparents did to your parents and their great-grandparents did to them. It could be a whole line of dysfunction. It has nothing to do with you, and yet affects you so profoundly, or can affect you so profoundly, because people just didn't know how to act. People didn't know how to get beyond. People didn't know how to process it. Or they had that kind of pop psych water under the bridge thing, where they're really, really suffering, but they can't get to a place where they can risk any other sort of life. They're just as scared, So life can be horrible and it can be terrifying, but we get to go through it together. You never make more of a connection than the pain you go through with someone you love. Being there for them, sharing their pain, and them sharing yours. There's nothing that more means being alive. And it's not all like, this like, huge suffering thing. I'm not like, I forget the school of Buddhism that, life is only suffering. There's those times you're on vacation, and you're just happy to see that other member of your family, and you have good times with them. And most of the time, it's just kind of a quiet, good time, But whether it's horror, or whether it's a horror show, or whether it's, a celebration, you get to go through it together. We're not alone. And we're so not alone. There's like 7 billion of us on the planet now and more. And it's something we got to think about. It's something we got to kind of embrace. Some of us are not going to get as much from our family that we'd like. We're not going to get those kind of relationships. Not because you're not willing, but because the other party just flat out has resigned from the possibility. And hopefully they'll come around. But if you really want to help them come around, show them you having those relationships with other people. Be an example, not an advice giver or a lecturer. You'd be better if. Never let those words drip from your tongue. People know. People know they'd be better inside, even if it's not conscious. They know. They want something different. And if you could find happiness and not consider that like everybody out there is just as scary as having a family member that you can't connect to, and you can break that dynamic, break that cycle. The only thing that's going to get them to come around is seeing you do that. And it's a nice thought, that we're not here alone. There's a religion, I don't know what it's called. The reason that we don't have like a visible God, like a guy on a cloud with like a lightning bolt, right? It's because God created all of this in order to enjoy himself, in order to feel loved, in order to feel family. And he had to split himself into all of us in order to do that. And it had to be choice. We had to choose it. I don't know how much I believe in a lot of spiritual things, but I think a lot of times spiritual things come down to what you want to believe in and what makes you feel better. And I never detract. I know there are some kind of like militant atheists who are like, oh, you're ruining the world. You're the reason for all the evil in the world and all that stuff. But that is one side of religion. It's pretty dark. But the other side is that sometimes we grab onto thoughts, and they're good thoughts, and we just want to spend our lives in them because they're just that good. So do me a favor if you find yourself kind of detracting from somebody else's religion. You're really just taking away that kind of spiritual happiness. Not just like they shouldn't detract from your beliefs. The sword cuts both ways. But respect it. Respect where they've gone with it. You don't have to be the militant atheist that wants to get rid of all the religions, so he could be this higher mammal. Religion's already helping us kind of do that. At least the spirituality part of it. So let people have that. Let people have that community. And let yourself have your family. And I guess let's do that as homework. Let's all kind of try that and come back and interact in some way. All right. I look forward to talking to you in the future.